walk away. My wealthy husband challenged me, saying I wouldn't survive a week without him. I simply dropped my keys on the counter of the house he paid for. The very next day, his boss and father were in a frenzy, calling non-stop, and now the bank is ringing off the hook. What exactly did you push her into doing? You wouldn't last a week without me, Mila. Ashton set down his crystal tumbler, the expensive whiskey inside catching the light from our chandelier. Without my money, my connections, my protection, you'd be nobody again. Just another pretty face, waiting tables, or answering phones. He straightened his designer tie, waiting for me to beg, to cry, to promise I'd never leave. Instead, I reached into my handbag and pulled out my keys. House, Range Rover. I lined them up on our granite counter, each one clicking against the stone. You're right, I said. Let's find out. The color drained from his face as I walked toward the door, leaving everything he'd bought me behind. But that was 3 hours ago. Now I sat in the lobby of a downtown hotel watching the security footage on my phone. Yes, I had access to our penthouse cameras. Another thing Ashton never knew I understood. He was pacing our kitchen, picking up the keys, setting them down, calling someone. Probably his business partner. Maybe his father. Definitely not the police, because what would he say? My wife left her keys and walked out. The concierge approached with a gentle smile. Miss Hawthorne, your suite is ready. My maiden name felt strange on my tongue when I'd made the reservation that morning, but it was mine. The one thing Ashton couldn't buy or sell or trade. I'd paid with my own money, 6 figures accumulated from what Ashton called my adorable little hobby of day, trading. He'd laugh at parties telling people I played with stocks like other wives played tennis. Nobody knew I'd turned his initial allowance of $10,000 into enough to live on for years. The suite was smaller than our penthouse, but infinitely larger in possibility. I set down my single Prosek suitcase, the one I'd hidden at my gym months ago, slowly filling it with essentials every visit. Ashton monitored our credit cards, but never questioned gym trips. After all, trophy wives needed to maintain their appearance. My phone buzzed, 17 missed calls already. I deleted his contact, watched his number become just digits on a screen. The first voicemail played accidentally when I tried to silence it. Mila, this is ridiculous. Come home. We'll talk about whatever upset you. His voice had that controlled quality, like he was handling a volatile investment instead of a wife. By the 5th message, the control was cracking. You can't just leave. Half of everything is in both our names. You need my signature too. I deleted them all without listening to the rest. The morning felt like a different lifetime. I'd woken at 6 as always, alone in our California king bed because Ashton had fallen asleep in his study again, surrounded by monitors showing overnight trading in Asian markets. The coffee maker was already programmed. Despite what he told his friends, I'd learned to use every appliance in that kitchen. He claimed I couldn't operate a toaster at last month's dinner party. Everyone laughed, even me, the good wife who knew her role. I'd stood at our floor-to-ceiling windows 23 floors up, watching the city wake. The silk robe he'd given me for Christmas itched against my skin. Designer label, wrong size, chosen by his assistant who thought all wives wore size 2. Today was our anniversary, 4 years. He hadn't mentioned it once this week, but I'd stopped expecting him to remember after year 2. That's when I decided to organize Ashton's study, looking for our insurance documents. He was always particular about his space, everything, arranged precisely. The voice recorder sat on his desk, that little silver device he used for important thoughts. When I knocked it over, reaching for files, it clattered onto the marble floor and started playing. His voice filled the room mid-conversation. She asked to see our investment statements. Yesterday. Laughter. I told her they were too complicated, lots of numbers. He actually believed me. Nathan. I could get her to sign over her kidneys and she'd just ask what pen to use. My hands had trembled as I picked it up, saw the date. Last Tuesday, the day I'd brought him lunch at his office, surprising him with his favorite sushi. He'd seemed so pleased, introducing me to his new analyst as the beautiful Mrs. Whitmore. Now I understood the smirk on the analyst's face. The recording kept going. That's why this type is perfect, Ashton continued. Pretty enough for photos, dumb enough to control, grateful enough to stay quiet. My father taught me well, marry beauty, rent intelligence. I'd placed the recorder back exactly where it had fallen, angled precisely how he'd left it. Then I'd found the insurance papers and something else. A folder marked prenuptial amendments, documents, dated last month, adding clauses about abandonment, forfeit of assets if I left without just cause, already notarized with my signature forged but expertly so. Standing in that study, surrounded by evidence of his success and my insignificance, something crystallized. He wasn't just dismissive or cruel. He was systematic. I was an investment, and he was already planning my depreciation. 3 weeks had passed since that night at the hotel. I'd established a routine. Morning trades from my suite, afternoon walks through the park, evenings reviewing the documents Margaret had been feeding, me in careful doses. Each file she shared revealed another layer of corruption. But today was different. Today was May 15th, our actual anniversary date, and despite everything, I'd agreed to one dinner just to discuss the logistics. Ashton had said on the phone, his voice carefully neutral. "We need to be civilized about this." The salon was the same one I'd used throughout our marriage. My hairdresser worked her fingers through my hair with practiced precision. "Special occasion?" she asked, not recognizing the bitter irony in her question. "Anniversary dinner?" I said, watching my reflection transform into what Ashton preferred. Sleek, controlled, expensive-looking. 4 years, right? How wonderful. Where's he taking you? His favorite restaurant, where the waiters knew his wine preferences, and the chef sent complimentary courses to his regular table. I'd made the reservation. Myself. Knowing he'd forget otherwise. The dress had cost $8,000, more than most people's monthly salaries, charged to the credit card he hadn't frozen yet. Dark blue, his favorite color on me. Though he hadn't commented on my appearance in 6 months, I studied myself in the boutique mirror. Every inch the perfect wife he'd curated, except for the flash drive hidden in my clutch, containing 40 gigabytes of evidence. My phone buzzed as I was leaving the salon. Slight change. Ashton's text read, "Nathan and Diana joining us. Need to discuss Singapore deal. Same time, of course." Our anniversary had become a business meeting. I sat in the back of the cab, watching Manhattan blur past and typed back. Perfect. He wouldn't catch the edge in that single word. Wouldn't notice it was the first time I hadn't added a heart emoji or love you to my response. 20 minutes later, another text. "Actually, father insists we come to the estate. He's having something catered. 8 p.m. The driver had already turned toward Midtown. "Change of plans," I told him, giving Richard's address. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was wearing a dress worth a small fortune to eat dinner at the Daco, a house of a man who'd never bothered to learn my last name before it became Whitmore. Richard's estate sprawled across 12 acres of manicured perfection. The circular drive was full of cars. I recognized Nathan's luxury vehicle, 2 other hedge fund partners' cars, even another colleague's new sports car. This wasn't a change of plans. This was an ambush disguised as dinner. Patricia answered the door. Richard's third wife, younger than me at 28. Her smile held the kind of exhausted recognition I'd seen in mirrors lately. "Mila, you look stunning," she said, though her eyes said something else entirely. "Why did you come?" The foyer opened into the main sitting room where Ashton held court, tumbler in hand, his third by the color in his cheeks. He glanced at me, taking in the dress, the hair, the effort, and turned back to his conversation without acknowledgement. Nathan waved. Diana sat apart, nursing a martini with the dedication of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "The lovely Mila," Richard boomed, appearing from his study. He kissed my cheek, reeking of cigars and bourbon. "Though I hear you're being not so lovely lately. This separation nonsense. Bad for business. You understand?" Margaret appeared with a tray of champagne. Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, enough for me to see she knew exactly what this was. As she handed me a glass, her fingers brushed mine. "Some anniversaries," she whispered, barely audible, "are about endings, not beginnings." The dining room had been set for 12. I recognized most faces, business partners, their wives, even Ashton's lawyer, though that realization came later. They'd orchestrated this entire evening to pressure me back into line. I sat in my designated seat between Nathan and another wife, facing a portrait of Richard's father, the original Whitmore who'd built this empire on insider trading and strategic marriages. Dinner arrived in courses. Somewhere between the soup and fish, Ashton started his performance. Funny story about how Mila and I met. he announced, though no one had asked. The room turned toward him with practiced attention. She was at a financial conference, completely lost. Wandered into a derivatives panel, thinking it was about art derivatives. He paused for laughter that came too readily. She asked if hedge funds were about landscaping investments. Literally thought we were discussing garden hedges. The story was fiction. I'd been at that conference presenting my graduate thesis on market manipulation in emerging economies, but that truth didn't fit his narrative of rescuing a beautiful fool. Thank goodness for lost puppies, Nathan added, raising his glass. They make the best pets. Diana's hand found mine under the table, a gesture meant to comfort, but her pity felt worse than the insults. I squeezed back once, then excused myself. Powder room, I murmured, though everyone knew women didn't powder anything anymore. Richard's study. Door stood partially open. His computer screen glowed, forgotten in his rush to play host. I slipped inside, memorizing everything. The desk layout, the wall safe behind a terrible reproduction of famous artwork, the filing cabinet marked private. His password was written on a note stuck to his monitor. His birth year and his favorite literary character. These men thought they were so clever. Through the window, I could see the dinner table, everyone laughing at something. Ashton was standing now, gesturing with his wineglass, playing the role of successful husband to perfection, while his actual wife stood in shadows gathering intelligence. When I returned, the conversation had shifted to business. Singapore expansion, leverage ratios, risk assessments. The wives sat silent and ornamental, while the men discussed millions like monopoly money. Then Nathan, drunk enough to be cruel, made his pronouncement. You know what Ashton is? He's an empire builder. And Mila here, she's the trophy case. Beautiful, elegant, but ultimately just for display. The laughter that followed had an edge, like they all knew the joke cut deeper than intended. Ashton raised his glass. Best investment I ever made. Great tax benefits, minimal maintenance, and she appreciates in value at all the right social events. Margaret was clearing plates, her movements deliberately slow. Our eyes met across the room, and in her gaze I saw 40 years of accumulated rage, 40 years of watching women like me be diminished, discarded, replaced. Her slight nod told me everything. She'd heard it all, recorded it all, was ready when I was. Something inside me shifted, not broke, but crystallized hard and clear as the diamond on my finger that suddenly felt like a shackle. 3 days of waiting felt like 3 years. I maintained my routine at the hotel, ordered room service, made small trades to keep my mind sharp. Ashton had stopped calling. His lawyer was handling everything now, sending formal letters about reconciliation in the interest of financial stability. Each letter went straight to my shredder, then to Patricia Kim, my new attorney who lived 2 hours away where Ashton's connections meant nothing. Tuesday arrived gray and humid. The meeting place sat squeezed between a funeral home and a shop selling knockoff handbags, its windows fogged with decades of steam from cooking. No one from Ashton's world would ever find themselves here, which made it perfect. Margaret was already seated in the back corner, wearing a cardigan despite the heat, looking like someone's grandmother who'd gotten lost on her way to church. But her eyes, those eyes held 40 years of carefully documented fury. Mrs. Whitmore, she began, and I cut her off. Hawthorne. I'm using my maiden name now. She smiled, pushing a tin of butter cookies across the table. The tin looked ancient, flowers painted on top, the kind your aunt might use for sewing supplies. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, lay a lipstick tube. Twist the bottom 3 times, then pull, she instructed. The lipstick was actually a flash drive, 16 gigabytes of what Margaret called insurance. I started collecting in 1982, she said, voice barely above the restaurant's din. Richard's first wife, Elena. She knew something was wrong with the books. Asked me to watch, to listen. Then she had her accident. Margaret's fingers made air quotes around the last word. Single car, perfect weather, failed brakes. After that, I kept everything. Every memo, every call transcript I could access, every mistress paid off with company funds, every regulatory filing that didn't match internal documents. The waiter brought tea and we fell silent until he left. Margaret poured with steady hands, though I noticed the slight tremor when she mentioned Elena. The second wife, Caroline, she lasted longer. Smart woman, business degree from a top school, started asking the right questions in year 4. Richard had her committed for exhaustion. She signed the divorce papers from a psychiatric facility, gave up all claims to avoid indefinite treatment. My tea went cold as Margaret outlined 2 decades of financial crimes, each one meticulously documented on that tiny drive. But she saved the worst for last. Your husband isn't just complicit. He's been grooming Nathan's wife, Diana. There's a paper trail, flowers charged to shell companies, hotel reservations that align with his supposed client meetings. He's planning to leave you, Mila. But first, he needs to destroy your credibility. That anniversary dinner, they were all witnesses to your unstable behavior. Walking out, leaving your keys, they'll paint it as a breakdown. The food arrived, but neither of us touched it. I was thinking about Diana's hand squeezing mine at dinner, wondering if her sympathy was real or part of another game. That night, I sat in my hotel room with my laptop, the flash drive loaded, scrolling through Margaret's evidence. It was overwhelming. 40 years compressed into folders labeled by year, by crime, by victim. But I needed more. I needed Ashton's own records to corroborate everything. Patricia Kim answered my call on the second ring, despite it being nearly midnight. I need to create a company, I told her. Something that sounds like nothing. That could be anything. When? Tomorrow. That's a rush job. It'll cost. I'll pay triple. 2 hours north, past exits where Ashton's colleagues lived in their own marble prisons. Patricia's office occupied the second floor of a building that also housed a dentist and a tax preparer. No marble, no modern art, just diplomas on the wall and a coffee maker that had seen better decades. She'd already drawn up the papers. Phantom Rose Holdings, incorporated in Delaware, registered in Connecticut, with a business address that led to a post office box, that led to another company, that led nowhere. The structure is completely legal, she explained, sliding documents across her desk, but complex enough that tracing it would take months of dedicated forensic accounting. By then you'll have accomplished whatever you're planning. How do you know I'm planning something? Patricia leaned back, studying me, because women who pay triple for Russian corporation don't do it for fun. They do it for survival. A week later, Ashton left for Singapore. 5 days of meetings about expansion into Asian markets, he'd said, though I knew from Margaret's intelligence that he was really setting up accounts I'd never be able to touch. The housekeeper seemed relieved when I told her to take the week off. Paid vacation, spring cleaning, I explained. I need to do this myself. Alone in our penthouse, I became someone else. Not the trophy wife, not the ornament, but a forensic archaeologist excavating evidence of my own destruction. Ashton's office password was embarrassingly sentimental. Our wedding date, as if that meant something to him beyond a tax advantage. His computer opened like a confession booth, folders within folders, trades time-stamped to the minute, showing clear patterns. Richard would have lunch with certain executives. Within hours, Ashton would make trades in those companies. The pattern was so obvious once you knew to look for it. In his locked drawer, the one he thought I didn't know about, lay correspondence that made my stomach turn. Not just about Diana, but about me. Emails to Nathan discussing, my mental fragility, suggestions that I might need professional intervention, plans to have me evaluated by a psychiatrist. Richard knew, one who'd testified in Caroline's commitment. My hands stayed steady as I photographed each page, uploaded each file to Phantom Rose Holdings' encrypted cloud storage. Every document went back exactly where I'd found it, aligned to the millimeter. Ashton would return to an office that looked untouched, while I held copies of everything that could destroy him. The final document was in his personal safe. He'd hidden the combination in a book about Warren Buffett, thinking he was clever. Inside, beyond the cash and coins, was a single folder marked Exit Strategy. Not for trades or business. For me, a timeline showing when to file for divorce, how to claim abandonment, which assets to hide first. My elimination was scheduled like a merger, complete, with profit projections. I photographed it all, then sat in his leather chair, looking at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, Margaret was probably filing her own reports. Patricia was setting up the next phase of corporate structures, and Ashton was sleeping soundly in Singapore, dreaming of empires built on the bones of women who'd trusted him. He was wrong about one thing, though. I wasn't just another trophy in his case. I was the one holding the hammer.